Hi everybody!
Atlus is having a banner year. Persona 3 Reload proved you can remake a game faithfully, yet update it for modern audiences. SMT5 Vengeance is a title people are really looking forward to. Also, they published the strategy RPG from Vanillaware called Unicorn Overlord. But what if I told you, despite all of these projects being awesome, these aren't the games you should be most hyped for? In fact, this game is one all fans of Japanese role-playing games should be supporting. That being Metaphor ReFantazio, the first new IP from Atlus since 2015's Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Now is the time for gamers to put their money where their mouths are, literally.
Tell me when I'm telling lies!
Seriously, if you look at the average discourse from video game-focused groups, forums, Discord servers, etc., you'll find people constantly complaining about there being a lack of new IPs, and companies only making remasters, remakes, and sequels. It's easy to understand why developers focus on these types of products. Remasters can be done with very small teams on a very small budget, and if the game is big enough, it'll likely mean a lot of sales just from nostalgia alone. Remakes work on a similar principle, albeit in more recent times, these tend to be of a much larger budget and on a grander scale than a straight-up remaster. Usually these projects have massive marketing budgets behind them, such as Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, or like Persona 3 Reload. Even if they're bigger budget, they are more than likely going to more than recoup the initial investments. These games are also typically used to judge the interest of the general gaming audience on if it'd be prudent for the developer to make more games around that IP. For example, Soul Hackers 2 was considered a flop commercially, partially because Atlus did a very poor job of marketing it, plus its predecessor was not available on modern platforms, meaning the chances of Soul Hackers 2 performing well was always going to be super low. Atlus had indicated they might have had interest in exploring that particular property more in the future. But since it failed to grab an audience, it's unlikely they will revisit Soul Hackers again. Typically though, sequels are a safe bet, mostly because it's easier to market a sequel than it is a brand new project. You have a baseline audience. Where sequels tend to fail is situations like Soul Hackers 2, where the last entry was over a decade old. It helps when the predecessor is still in the public consciousness, and not just on the minds of weebs very into niche RPGs.
Oops, I'm breaking the fourth wall.
Basically, a known quantity is always less of a risk. During the current age of gaming, companies are becoming more and more risk-adverse, mostly because games are ballooning in scope and budget, meaning pretty much everything has to be a hit. So with something like Metaphor, Atlus is actually taking an incredible risk. Which brings me on to my next point. Why is Metaphor such a big risk? Part of the risk comes from it having no established audience. If this project was smaller in budget and scope, that risk factor would be far less. However, Metaphor has a AAA level budget, so if it fails, that failure is going to sting all the more. Also, if you look at some of the interviews Atlus have given on the project, they've indicated it's going to feature some ideas that will be iterated on when Persona 6 launches, which I believe is going to come out next year. If you want to know why, a card will be popping up now, along with a link in the description and in a pinned comment. So going off that, we know aspects of Metaphor will be found in Persona 6. If Metaphor proves to be a flop, this may lead Atlus to heavily re-evaluating Persona 6, which is admittedly not too likely given it's already fairly late in development. But what features are likely to carry over from Metaphor into Persona? If rumors are to be believed, and I am taking those with a massive pinch of salt, it's likely the more open-ended aspects of Metaphor. While you're still on a timetable, it's a far less strict one. Metaphor allows players to explore the world far more than the Persona games do at present, which is a good thing as it gives players more agency, which a lot of Persona fans have been asking for, since the game felt very on rails at points, especially with Persona 5 and that damned stupid cat.
Tell me when I'm telling lies!
It's also a risk because Atlus have stated they plan on making Metaphor the third pillar of their company's plans going forward, meaning their big three would be Shin Megami Tensei, Persona, and Metaphor. I wonder if this big three will have as much impact on the gaming industry as Wade, Bosch, and LeBron did on basketball.
Well, it's kind of hard to tell, man. It really is. It's kind of hard to tell if that's going to have that big of an impact. It all depends, like you've been saying in this video, on how Atlus decides to market the game. If they decide to market it in a good way, we could see yet another Heedles type of thing, but in the gaming space. Yes, that Heatles is the name that the NBA fans actually coined for that Wade, LeBron, and Bosh team. Don't get me started on how stupid that name is. But anyway, then you have, of course, if they market it wrong, we could get what I like to call the old man club when it comes to a big three. Which, if you don't know about that, there is a big three from the late 90s that was in Houston. It was Charles Barkley, Scottie Pippen, and Hakeem Olajuwon. They were all on the Rockets at the same time, but slight problem. They were all old men at that point. They were pushing 40. They were on their way out of the league. They had just a few years left in them. It was way too late for a big three. So, depending on how Atlas decides to market it, we could have a Heatles 2.0, or we could have a Old Man's Club. Let's see where they end up. I hope they don't end up over here in the Old Man's Club. I hope they end up here with the Heatles.
Unlike those three, though, I don't think Metaphor will struggle out of the gate. I imagine it'll sell quickly for the first week or two on the market, then slow up, since Metaphor is projected to release in the later part of this year. There's a reason most gamers call October Broaktober.
Yes, there is, good sir. There is very good reason why gamers call October Broaktober. It's because every single big name publisher and developer, it seems like they all just collectively come together. And they're just like, we're going to release all of our bangers in the same month, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Like, seriously, do you think that we just, like, vomit money? Gaming developers, like, come on, man. Like, I struggle with money, okay? I do. I ain't got that much money to be throwing around here, okay? I'm not Mr. Make It Rain over here, and neither is Colin. So, like, come on, man. Like, give us a break. Give us a break. Give us broke-ass bitches a break.
I think after the initial hype, it'll be a slow burn, and will pick up sales-wise when word of mouth spreads. So why should you support Metaphor ReFantazio beyond it being something new, which you're all demanding, and the fact it's going to be a risk? You should support this game because it looks like it's going to do hybrid combat right. For those of you who don't know, I've never been a super big fan on hybrid combat when it comes to JRPGs. If you want a video as to why that is, let me know in the comments and I'll get to working on it. But generally speaking, hybrid systems don't do it properly because they go halfway with both systems, and the gameplay feels less satisfying as a result. Metaphor will let you pick between the two akin to what Trails Through Daybreak does, which is the right direction as it allows the player to customize the experience as they wish. Also, sometimes just going to town on scrub mobs with hack-and-slash combat is incredibly satisfying. Also, Metaphor looks like it'll be the right blend of world building and really interesting storylines. At present, Atlas has great world building, but middling storylines with the SMT titles, and great stories with acceptable world building in the Persona games. It's kind of like how Falcom uses the Legend of Heroes for the deep storytelling and world building, and use Ys as the just casual fun times. I'd actually love to do a video further exploring how Atlas can use Metaphor as the middle ground between SMT and Persona, whereas Falcom can use Tokyo Xanadu as the middle ground between Trails and Ys. If that video idea interests you, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Since Metaphor will be the middle ground, that makes it an interesting proposition, especially if it gets sequels and spin-offs. It being a melting pot of ideas very well could bring the SMT crowd and the Persona crowds together. After Persona 3, there was a decided diverging point. Persona will always be aimed at a less hardcore crowd, but by incorporating social sim elements, it really diverted from SMT. It was there it managed to forge its own identity, and it brought in a much younger demographic, since Persona 3, 4, and 5 at their core are coming-of-age stories that also deal with philosophical themes. SMT primarily focuses on lore with heavy emphasis on philosophy. Metaphor can again be a meeting point, which brings me on to something else I want to discuss regarding Metaphor. This is something I've had on my mind regarding Metaphor ReFantazio for a while now. As I just discussed in the previous point, it can be a meeting of ideas from both Persona and SMT. However, it can also be a testbed for ideas Atlus want to incorporate into both franchises, since Metaphor isn't going to be constrained to defined formulas like the other two are. Atlus can mold it however they see fit, so if an idea works really well in Metaphor, they can incorporate it into either SMT or Persona if it's fitting of either the story or mechanics they wish to iterate on. Basically, Metaphor could become an innovator instead of just being iterative, which is something the gaming industry is currently struggling with. Most games are iterative and not innovative. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it means some gamers are going to feel bored more easily as experiences become more and more homogenized. I'm personally of the opinion you don't need to be innovative, just build a good experience. But innovation is definitely appreciated from time to time. Basically, it comes to this. If you want to see companies, especially those making JRPGs, to take more risks, you need to support Metaphor ReFantazio. If you've made it this far into the video, hit the like button. Thanks go out to my current channel members, R. Campbell and Danny Boy. If you want to support the channel further, consider hitting the join button or clicking the link in the description. Want more of my content? Check out my video on when we can expect Persona 6, or whatever video YouTube thinks you'll like. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.